Community Action Dacorum. We support, empower, develop.
But it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mary Mahoney, and I'm delighted to welcome her as our guest speaker. Mary is the Head of Lifelong Learning at the University of Wolverhampton, and she has established a Centre for Lifelong Learning and leads on a range of strategic initiatives focused on the role of learning in economic and social development through flexible, distributed, lifelong and life-led learning in key locations. Drawing on Mary's experience, she's going to talk to us about a vision for learning cities, looking at the use of empty town centre properties and as a way of delivering adult education to the community. And with the impact of COVID-19 on unemployment, access to intergenerational adult learning to develop new skills, which may be the difference between gaining meaningful employment and becoming long-term unemployed. Mary will look at how this model may be adapted in future town planning to engage communities and support community cohesion, both in Hemel Hempstead and in the wider county across Hertfordshire. And I have to say that wearing a completely different hat as the Hertfordshire Cabinet Member for Education, Libraries and Localism, which also includes skills, I think this is a particularly important area, and it's an important area where we can actually look at the changes in the town centre to provide new and innovative ways of offering services to the public in the town centres, which may not necessarily be focused around the retail establishment. But I would welcome, I hope she is here because I don't see her on my screen, but I welcome Dr. Mary Mahoney.
Thank you very much, Terry. Just share my screen. Can everyone hear me okay? Well, thank you very much to Simon and to all of you. It's been fascinating listening to the annual general meeting, and I've been to another annual general meeting today, so it was yours was probably more interesting than mine. So thank you very much. I hope I can deliver on the tall order that you've tasked with me. But what I'd like to do is just share with you the story of the work we do, and then talk to you about some of the key lessons that we've learned that may be of value to you, because I think this is an area you may want to consider. Having listened to what's been said, you have an enormous portfolio of work. You are at the cutting edge of everything that you could possibly be at, but perhaps there's an opportunity, particularly in the context of the pandemic and the impact that's going to have on places, for you to think about working in developing a new strand of your work on learning in place and putting learning at the heart of your community. So I'm the Head of Lifelong Learning, and my task today, I think, is if I just clear with you what I'd like to do. I'd like to set the context for why we do what we do, how we do it using 2 case studies, and then talk to you about the opportunities for yourselves and what lessons you might like to learn. There's no right way to do this. There's just an important feature that sits right at the heart of what I'm talking about that you need to consider. So I work at the University of Wolverhampton, but essentially I'm here on behalf of every partner that we work with, and we work with an enormous number of partners. The university is a fairly distinctive university in that it understands its role in place. It sees itself as an anchor institution. It sees itself as unable to do anything unless it works in partnership, and through working in partnership we can transform lives. We are the University of Opportunity, and so we therefore have to deliver on that. You can't just use that term, you then have to demonstrate how you do it, and one of the core ways we do it is through integrated work in lifelong learning and in the role of learning in place. The first strand of activity that I'd like to talk about is the way we take learning to the community. So although we're a higher education institution, we are diversely spread. So the first image you have is of University Centre Telford. So it's called University Centre because Telford wanted a university of their own. even though as a university we have a campus a mile out of town, for the most of the population in Telford, they don't understand what higher education is. They have fairly low aspirations, and they are a little bit like Milton Keynes in terms of moving forward, but they don't have something like the Open University at the heart of their town. So we have worked in partnership with the Telford and Wrekin Council to put learning at the heart of the South Water redevelopment. And we are on the third floor of the new South Water building. There's a library on floor 1 and council services on level 2. And in the foyer, there's a Costa Coffee, there's a Hungry Horse pub, etc. So we are basically in a community premises, putting the learning element in and supporting their careers team as well. That was our very first learning centre, and we work in partnership to make it happen. We've been running for 5 years, nearly 6 years in this one. We've then moved on to Stafford, very small premises in Stafford. All of our spaces have learning, flexible spaces, meeting spaces, and places where people can come and work and study and have access to computers. In Stafford, a town very similar to Hemel Hempstead, and it lost its university. Staffordshire University, of all things, moved to Stoke-on-Trent, and the county council and the borough council felt that they'd lost learning out of the heart of that centre. So we moved back in. Stafford is a very much transitional town. It's part of its high street's dead, and they're creating new opportunities for innovation, etc. So that's Stafford. And the third one, completely different again, is putting learning, a partnership for learning into the Black Country Living Museum and formalising the work we already do with the museum, but focusing on place here in terms of the identity of the Black Country, which is where the University of Wolverhampton is principally based, and includes Sandwell, Dudley, Walsall and Wolverhampton. Right. Moving on. So how do we do it? I'll do this very, very quickly. There are about 6 core principles that underpin our work. First of all, we develop strategic partnerships with core agencies. So in the Telford example, our partners are Telford and Wrekin Council. They're a learning provider in their own right. They offer programs. We offer courses for the Further Education College, which I should have updated the slide, is Telford College. And we run our own programs, but we also open the space to anyone who wants to come and offer learning programs in there, working around our mainstream provision.
Mary,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, your slides aren't moving on at times. Would you like me to share the display?
Right.
I can do it from here if you like.
Can you?
Yeah, if you want to stop sharing at your end.
Okay.
I'll do that for you.
There you go. Dropped it away.
Give me a second.
Because I was using the cursor on the keyboard rather than the arrow on the screen. Sorry.
That's easy done. Say that.
Any luck?
Yeah, just getting that. Yeah. And there you go. So, no problem.
So is that okay? Where did you see? Just perhaps go back and have a look at the last couple of slides so you can see the premises if you didn't see those. Right. So that's South Water building in the heart of Telford. The next one is the Stafford Centre. It's not a great photo of it, but it just gives the impression that I want to give in a moment. And then the Black Country Studies Centre is the next one. It's a virtual centre at the moment because the Black Country Living Museum is going to double in size and have a learning centre as part of it. And the next slide talks about the partnerships. Now, as well as that, obviously, we partner with everybody. We ran an event last week with Job Centre in relation to health as a destination for people who have just been made redundant. If you could move on, please, Simon. We work with everybody. We work to remove barriers to learning by increasing engagement. So the sorts of activities you run. We run English cafes for people who want to enter education but don't feel that they've got language skills at this stage. We created a knitting group, which then turned into a group that made scrubs, etc. in the pandemic. We always have something to take the group on to in our learning. So the important things around the engagement and then the progression opportunities. Next slide, please. We position learning in every part of community activity to normalise it, so people expect to see some kind of learning activity. We have all sorts of people who play games, develop activities for children, teach sign language, do whatever it is. And a lot of it is intercultural learning opportunities and intergenerational learning activities as well. I'll give you an example of the reason why we do this. When we first started doing this, there was a big event in Telford in the park, and we had an activity table for children for colouring in, and that way we could then talk to adults when they came along. The children would be engaged through colouring in, and we could talk to the adults. And one of the parents stood back and said to her child, "Oh, no, I don't think you can do that, because that's university colouring in, and we can't do that." And I think that quote summed up the kinds of problems that we face in our communities and what we try to do to break it down. We become part of the community and part of their lives. Next one, please. We run all forms of learning programs, so formal ones such as professional qualifications, so Chartered Institute, marketing management, etc. Adult teaching qualifications for people who work in community and further education sector. We offer top-ups for degrees for people who are in work and who've done foundation degrees. And we offer community learning and all sorts of informal and non-formal programs as well. Thanks, Simon. One of our most important tasks is to extend people's understanding of how vital learning is in life. And so we use any expert we can find who's done anything in their life and bring in young people, school children, their parents, etc., to talk about all sorts of things. And we've been lucky to have Professor Mark O'Shea, who's a world expert on herpetology, which is snakes and reptiles. He's done multiple lectures and he works for the BBC. And over the period of time in COVID, we've had to close our centres until very recently, and we've run our lectures online, and our participation has grown phenomenally. We've run guided programs into getting people onto the online context, and we are stunned by the interest in learning of all sorts about any topic we can think of. And it can be formal, kind of how you do, so cyber security, how you protect yourself, whereas it's just, are you interested in voodoo or witchcraft or those sorts of things? We don't mind what we run courses on. If you wouldn't mind. Thanks, Simon. We also work with businesses either through a new skill development program or by offering business startup programs, and we work with the Chamber of Commerce in this and with the Borough Council and the local authority, etc. And that's the Stafford Centre. Okay, next one. So, but most of all, we understand in each of these locations what we're trying to do. We understand the challenges we're trying to face in that location and why we're putting learning at the heart of that. And that's something I'll come back to in a moment. The next example is the idea of a learning city, a learning neighbourhood, or a learning town. Next slide, please. So we have developed in Wolverhampton itself one of the most deprived areas in the West Midlands, with one of the greatest impacts of COVID on its population through job losses, etc. We have created Wolverhampton City Learning Region. We call it Wolverhampton Learning City, but we call it a Learning City Region because it is positioned in the kind of combined authority regional context now, and we want to be able to bring other groups in. But it's also about people, where people work and live, and a lot of people who work in Wolverhampton don't live there. So we, sorry, this was some feedback. Thanks, Simon. Next question, next slide. So we have 260,000 people in the area and 88 languages and high levels of deprivation and pockets of isolation in the community. Thank you. We have buy-in from the Mayor, we have a vision statement, and we are connected into the global network of learning cities. And I've just come out of the meeting on health and wellbeing that UNESCO is just running. The rationale for why we're doing this is because in Wolverhampton there are lots of plans around economic and social development, but we are very, very concerned that the residents of Wolverhampton don't share that vision or that prosperity. So we have to put learning there at the heart of that journey to make sure that people come along with that process, and we work as a collective really to mobilise resources to make sure that happens. Thanks, Simon. So we have in this one 3 cross-cutting priorities for everybody. These are a problem across the board. These have been agreed at the highest level within the community, and our issues are around realising aspirations rather than raising them, about increasing the skills of the workforce and looking at adults' mental health and wellbeing. And we badge things that already happen and we create new things to put learning as the priority. Thanks, Simon. You'll see from this slide, this is just one example of the sorts of agencies that come together to create the Learning City. We have a core team of partners, obviously the main education providers of adult education and further education in the university. But one of the things we're really lucky with in Wolverhampton is that there's a collective group of community learning providers called the Learning Platform, and they've been working with the City Council to create something called Wolverhampton Learning Communities. So they've mapped the city and the types of learning that occurs, and they now have a platform for work. In addition to that, we work with Wolves Foundation, the Wolverhampton Wanderers football team, and all of the WVSC agencies, as well as U3A and WEA, and they're all vital members because everyone reaches a different part of the community. Thanks, Simon. So the next slide just talks about the mapping that Learning Communities does to give you a sense of checking what's happening in the community at community level working, and my colleagues could give you some insights into that work if you would be interested. Okay, next slide. The public face of the city for most residents is a festival. Now, unfortunately, we weren't able to hold our second festival in the current year, but we did join into the Global Learning Festival and hosted and participated in a whole range of different activities. And that festival was pulled together online in about 6 weeks. So being part of the UNESCO model gives us that opportunity to network and join in. Next slide, please. We profile also what the benefits of learning are to the city at both at individual, organisational and citywide level. And I'll share these slides with you and you can look at this because it is very much around what's in this for me and for my community, but also for businesses and also the greater growth of the city itself. So next slide. This moves on to the last section, and I know this is a lot to comprehend and to take in and think about, but this is just the beginning of a conversation with you. Why learning? And I think this is probably the most important slide in my presentation, particularly in COVID, where COVID and the pandemic has exacerbated inequalities. Learning changes lives, and sometimes you need a targeted approach to a certain initiative to raise awareness of it, but also to position something which is taken for granted. And by learning, we don't just mean education, formal education with schools and partnerships through those agencies. We mean learning across the lifespan and at every age and including every opportunity, because the benefits of learning are enormous. And I'm really pleased in the last session I was at, Belfast Learning City is producing a document at the moment on the health benefits of learning, and we don't have enough evidence like that where we can share with policymakers. But learning plays a crucial role in health and wellbeing, plays a role in productivity, in having fun. I think one of the things that you'll see in my slides is that it's all about bright, colourful, playfulness, enjoyment, and everybody enjoying themselves. So vital, but it's also vital for economic development and growth and prosperity, investment and new jobs and new skills. And in the pandemic, we have to help people reskill. We have to help them understand that they have a set of skills that may have been in retail or hospitality, but that they are easily transferable across to other sectors. We have to encourage digital literacy, and digital poverty issues have to be faced by all of us collectively to bring everyone along and not increase the inequalities. And we have to learn to help give people skills for coping in a challenging, changed life environment, and we have to ensure social cohesion and people working together around stories of hope and vision. And what better ways to do that than having fun through learning and creating a sense of hope. Thanks, Simon. And so the key questions and challenges, I think, for yourselves are, what are the challenges that you're trying to face? What role would learning play in addressing those challenges at a town, an area, or key community, or across Hertfordshire? What are the issues that you need to focus on, and how can learning play a core role? And can you create a coalition of key stakeholders who can work in partnership to use learning to create the transformational change to move either a problem or a challenge that you have, or even a population group from one place to another? In Telford, we were there because it was a new town. It had very low aspirations. When we moved into the town, we knew as a university we only offered about 4 courses locally, and the Further Education College offered 2 higher education courses. We now offer something around 28 degree programs, and in April this year we've just been awarded funding to open a new Centre of Excellence in Allied Healthcare. We have, and that's just on our campus at the University Centre. We run an enormous number of programs to enable people to progress from one level to the next and to fulfil their dreams and aspirations. And for those who don't want that, we offer opportunities to have fun and learn through social connectedness and partnership building. So that's just Telford. Stafford's completely different. Stafford, the town is needs to look at itself very, very radically. And so it's just a wonderful opportunity for us to be part of that building and the creation of a plan for Stafford, of which learning is a crucial part of it, and working in partnership. So we're going to create the Telford Learning Town model, because we're there and we've done all of this work and we built the partnerships, and now the next step is, how does learning help you transform that town? And so the final slide, just for sharing with you, the key lessons we've learned, that if you want to do this, and I think there'll be future funding opportunities, then you need strategic commitment and a champion. At the Global Health and Wellbeing meeting we've just been to, our mayor was there listening to us, and there were cities from all around the world presenting on what they're doing. You need strategic buy-in and commitment from the local authority or the county or whoever, and you need a champion who believes passionately in the power of learning. You need a consensus on the rationale for what you're trying to do and the direction of travel based on evidence. All of our work is based on understanding the baseline and what we're trying to do in terms of transformation. You need strong partnership working with the community and with learning providers, formal, informal and non-formal. Ideally, you need a joined up approach. You need some agreement around the opportunity to progress people, because they'll come and they'll start, but then they'll want to know what next. So you need partnerships with other providers who can take people on that journey and move them on. You need enthusiastic local staff with a passion for their place and for their learning, and you need a manager with tenacity, a bit like Simon, really, just kind of keeps going, keeps looking for opportunities and wonderful new ideas. You need realism about how long it will take. In some locations, Stafford 2 years, Telford 5 years. It's just Wolverhampton, probably 10 or 20-year project. And so it's not going to happen overnight. And you do need some level of resource commitment. In the Wolverhampton City Learning Region, the university pays for a coordinator. that's the only commitment that anybody is forced to make, and we do that because we're passionate about the place and because the university is not a great destination for many young people either. So it's in our interest to invest in this, to make a greater sort of significance around learning and the city and what it stands for. And you also need, and I've learned this the odd way of employing wonderful young staff who use social media, and you probably do this yourself, but they need to constantly keep an eye on the opportunities, what's of interest to local people, what festivals, what activities, and what's happening, and to push the messages out through new technologies. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you've got any time, but I'm conscious we're way over time.
Well, thank you very much, Mary, for a really interesting and excellent presentation. I think there's a lot of food for thought there. If you've got a few moments, there are a couple of questions which I think have come in, which perhaps you might like to answer. Uli would like to know, do you have a strong University of the Third Age organisation in your area?
Well, again, you know, I've talked about several locations. In Wolverhampton, they're an absolutely essential partner in the Learning City initiative. And at the Learning Festival, they came along, and we had Children's University at one end and U3A at the other end. It was just marvellous. They're a wonderful support to us, and always offering new and interesting and committed ideas and actions. In the Telford area, we're right on the boundary of two U3As, so it is a bit harder to engage with them. And also, I don't think up until this point we haven't run a festival of any sort of learning, so we'll, I think, move on to that stage going forward. And in Stafford, we have not had any real engagement with community level agencies, so that'll be the next step in the creation of a learning town. So I think it is horses for courses in terms of when you engage. Depending on what you're trying to do, then you need to set the base platform up, and then you will find other people start to flock to what you're doing.
Yes, thank you. And Chris would like to know what sort of support do you have from the local business community?
Yeah, again, that differs from one location to the next. The Chamber of Commerce is incredibly supportive in Wolverhampton, and we are answerable because UNESCO requires this. We are answerable to the local authority, and our work sits in the Education, Employment and Skills Board. We report all reports through them, and they are represented by any business representative that is responsible for obviously education and training. So the big brewery, Marston's, who I think has just changed its name and merged, they offer their own training programs, and so they're incredibly supportive of what we do. So again, it just depends on the location. In Stafford, much more activity because Stafford needed business development. In Telford, there's a growth hub, and it operates the support through business, so we link into that group. So again, it is about what works locally, but yeah, businesses are at the heart, certainly, of the Wolverhampton Learning City initiative, because one of the core skills is workforce development.
And John Burney is asking, what's the main source of your funding? Do you have direct user fees at all?
In the regional learning centres, we do, yes. We have the centre, so a bit like yourselves, sometimes we charge people for room usage. Other times we think, no, this is absolutely vital to enable adults to progress and to access the centre. Many of our adults will kind of not come in because they're a bit scared of it. They don't have any sense of understanding that there's anything in this for them. And so we have to run meetings and engagement activities, etc., through our partner agencies just to get people in. And once people are in and they're comfortable, you can then have a chat to them about what they want for themselves as individuals, or they approach us. So in each of the centres, we have an information, advice and guidance section. So a receptionist deals with whoever's coming into each centre, but they also talk to people. They have lots and lots of information about level 0 to level 8 higher education and doctoral level for anybody who's come in. But also we advertise everything that U3A, the community and voluntary sector and so on is operating, and we're part of that network. So we meet, we go to their briefing sessions and they come to ours. So I think it's a conduit through our partners and our key stakeholder groups and organisations like yourself. We would be working incredibly closely with you to do this. Funding depends on, again, the location. So the university has a regional location, and the way we've been able to demonstrate the return on investment to the university for setting up a centre in Stafford or in Telford is how many students have progressed. So we monitor the data of individuals who are enrolling in higher education and across the different spectrum and using baseline data. And in the year prior to this last one, we brought in an additional 3.5 million in student recruitment from 2 locations from 5 parliamentary constituency postcodes in both. So this is something that is, as I said, is at the heart of the university's mantra, but it also pays back in terms of the university. With the Learning City initiative, no, we don't have any funding sources yet, and we're going to be seeking them. We felt like we needed to get runs on the board and have a track record, have a reputation and a clarity around what we were trying to do, and have a really strong reporting and partnership base. And then we can articulate exactly what the core issues are. And we are looking at the moment for funding for COVID behaviour change training about how people understand messages, particularly in non-English speaking populations in the city. So we're looking for benefactor type funding for that. And then once we've got a clear idea, we'll move on and get core funding. Ideally, we'd like the owner of the football club to sponsor it, you know, because they run their own training and charity arm of it, and maybe that's a way they can invest something back into the city. So we've got a long view on how we might engage funding.
Thank you. And just one final question, I think, has come up from Rob. He's saying, do you use the local community centres as potential venues for any of your courses?
We do, and we use football clubs as well. One of the things we've noticed is some of our activities are too big for our own venues. So what a lovely way to then take it back. We go and use whatever we can in any location. And so we work in partnership. It's reciprocal. If we work with a partner, they come to us and we come to them. So yes, absolutely right. And one perfect example is Bilston Resource Centre on the edge of Wolverhampton. They have a whole series of programs, and we are now running programs in their venue, and their programs around progression to higher education for any student who wants to think about doing that. We also have a couple of outreach workers who work with non-traditional learners, people who have the qualifications but who won't progress to higher education because they perceive barriers. But they tend to be just dedicated education type initiatives to support these broader community learning activities. So yeah, it's a complex picture I'm painting. It's complex, it's multifaceted, but it can't work without a true sense of core partners, associated partners and key stakeholders, and some level of accountability for it, and a clear mission at the heart of it. Okay,
Thank you. I think Simon wanted to make a point. He got a comment rather than a question, I think, isn't it, Simon?
No, I was, thanks, Colin. I was just
your thinking a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, I was just going to comment. And there were a couple of times when Mary wanted to move slides and it took a second, because in my chat, it just came alive with people who were inspired with what you were saying there, Mary, and wanting to do that locally. People are already talking to me about how that might look and whether we could partner with them to try and do something similar. So, yeah, thank you for that. That's wonderful.
Thank
and
you.
I think it's put a lot of one or two comments coming through from the creative learning team. I think that you've put a lot of ideas in their heads, which I'm sure will be very, very useful in the future for them. So,
and can I just add then on that point, Wolverhampton is host to the British Art Show in March, I think it's March to June next year, and we are developing a campaign of cultural learning programs for all of our core partners, and so that might be something we could start working with you on as well, with some of the people who've just come forward on that, if that's of any use. And it's about what's the value of something like the British Art Show to me as a citizen, particularly in COVID, because it can just be seen as a waste of money, really, unless we can bring it alive and make the connection between creative expression, culture, and mental health and well-being, and that role of learning in that. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Well, it really remains to say the thank yous. Thank you very much, Mary, especially for a really interesting, fascinating presentation. And I think you've stimulated a lot of ideas, a lot of food for thought there, and opportunities perhaps for us in the future. Also, I think although Terry, I think, is now gone, I'd like to record our thanks to him for chairing our meeting this afternoon. I'd particularly also like to thank Simon and Helen for organising today's meeting. And obviously all of you, thank you very much for coming. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it's been a different format this year, but at least we have been able to hold the meeting in the way that we normally try to. So thank you all very much for coming, and I hope to see you all here again next year.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Any directors who are attending the AGM as the trading company, I'll switch it on in about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Your next link.